There. So my perspective is coming from the nexus of studies I did recently on macroeconomic prospects, while touching on the role and implications of the rapid onset climate events. And the intersection of key findings augments the results of the survey of ESCAP. And in general, structural vulnerabilities, reliance on climate-sensitive sectors, and socioeconomic inequalities exacerbate long-term scarring effects on economic growth. And secondly, in the Philippines, while the Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone economies, rapid onset climate events is expected to intensify given the frequency and severity of calamities we have experienced recently, which is now posing a serious threat on agricultural production, increase in inflation, damage to infrastructure, among others, affecting macroeconomic prospects and growth. But first, I must commend the bold framing of the Economic and Social Survey 2025, asserting rightly that the health of our climate is no longer an externality on macroeconomics, but it is now intrinsic to it. Mr. Malik emphasized earlier that resilience is operating under rising structural fragility, namely higher for longer interest rates, rising global trade fragmentation, and increasing frequency of climate disasters. And this points us to a key implication that the steady GDP numbers we have been seeing recently in many Southeast Asian economies, especially the Philippines, the GDP numbers we see actually mask deeper vulnerabilities, that beneath the headline growth figures lie certain structural risks, such as persistent income inequality, high youth unemployment, weak labor productivity, fragile fiscal positions, and underinvestment in climate resilient infrastructure. And these are combined or compounded rather by climate-induced disruptions and global economic uncertainties, pushing the growth prospects down further because of these constraints that we're facing. And then, second, a profound insight from the survey report is the identification of a double transformation challenge, specifically escaping the middle income trap, which has been explained in detail earlier, but at the same time, conducting a green economic transformation. So this has actually been part of the discussion in the recent public policy forum, wherein we're calling for some sectoral upgrading, moving up the global value chain. But then the Philippines may be asking the following concerns. Is the Philippines also building green manufacturing capabilities on top of its investments in BPO, in KPO, even in remittance-led growth? Second concern for the Philippines would be, are our MSMEs, comprising bulk of the enterprises in the country, equipped to participate in green value chains, such as renewable energy, sustainable construction, even digital agriculture? And it is also worth noting that the ESCAP survey urges us to capitalize on Asia Pacific's unparalleled position, particularly in green manufacturing. And what does this mean for the Philippines? Number one would be the Philippines can explore investing aggressively in renewable energy value chains, developing climate resilient agribusiness, and leveraging the Philippines' strategic minerals like nickel for the green economy. Because without strategic upgrading, the Philippines' resilience today could become tomorrow's stagnation. And what do I mean by that? Okay. Current growth, yes, they may appear to be stable, but if the Philippines or any other developing economy would fail to move up the value chain, invest in innovation, and even embrace green and digital transformation, we risk locking our economies into low productivity and low wage trajectories. And this kind of resilience is quite deceptive in such a way that it absorbs shocks in the short term, but it leaves us ill-prepared for long-term competitiveness. Third point, no, I strongly agree with Mr. Malik's point that the macroeconomic climate interplay remains, or there remains an opportunity to fully understand it and integrate it into macroeconomic policy. Now, in the Philippines, let's think of it from a fiscal exposure, wherein around 5 to 7% of GDP is in terms of annual losses, loss estimates from typhoons, floods, and other natural calamities. And yet, fiscal buffers are limited. Debt servicing already consumes around 20 to 25% of public revenues, and these have to be addressed accordingly. Because climate-induced inflation through agricultural damage, energy price spikes is already observable, and consumers are feeling it already. But then, largely reactive from a policy framework. That's why I would recommend the need for forward-looking, climate-integrated policy mix strategy, particularly on disaster-contingent debt instruments, climate risk stress testing of financial institutions, particularly universal and commercial banks, and this has been in a discussion with the central bank wherein strategic sovereign green bond issuances can be explored instead of ad hoc borrowings. And I just wanted to emphasize this because the survey argued that managing climate risks must be mainstreamed into macroeconomic management and not treated just a special project. Because climate risks are systemic, it has to be looked from a systemic perspective more than an individual, from an individual component. And then fourth, Mr. Malik also rightly pointed out that many economies in the region have yet to be ready or to be prepared. And while the Philippines falls into the less exposed, but with gaps in coping capacity category, there are certain strengths and weaknesses that the Philippines has to look into. But then looking at it from the results of the survey, it is not just, I saw it not just as an analytical document, but rather as a mirror telling us that we must strengthen fiscal resilience, which we have argued in a study that we did last year, develop climate resilient financial systems, and of course, prioritize green economic development over short-term populist measures that may be essential for sustainable progress. And as a way forward, so here's some of my thinking aloud, here's some of my proposal on 3 strategic priorities inspired by the findings presented by Mr. Malik earlier. Number 1 is on climate integrated public investment planning on top of building roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. And this can come in the form of designing resilient coastal roads, green public transportation, and renewable powered public facilities. Number 2 can be regional risk pooling and financial platforms. Again, so Mr. Malik earlier pointed out the need for inclusive regionalism. And ASEAN plus 3 economies, including the Philippines, can advance regional disaster risk financing mechanisms and pooled green transition funds for MSMEs, which will be very helpful for a lot of enterprises in the Philippines. But then the most important thing here is that we should not bear the risks alone because there can be strategic foresights in institutions of the Philippines. Like, for example, it was mentioned earlier that climate risks are non-linear. Therefore, we must institutionalize strategic foresight units inside the Department of Economic Planning and Development, the Department of Finance, even the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Of course, including also the local government units. And let me close by saying that the findings Mr. Malik has presented earlier, as well as the overall results of the survey, remind us that all of us, regardless of the economic status of the country, we are at a strategic moment. Now, the question before us is no longer whether to act, okay, and that has been the discussion in previous decades. It is whether how economies, governments will be able to act wisely, courageously, and cooperatively. Because the convergence of economic uncertainty and climate risks are here. Okay? There's an opportunity to build economies stronger, fairer, and of course, greener, as aligned with the nexus of macroeconomics and climate change. And on that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.